Our story unfolds with our protagonist in his uniform asking the air if he looked weird. He wouldn't stand out due to everyone else having the same uniform on. A cat with admiration within their eyes escaped his bag to peer. The cat's name was Felice, and they didn't want to be trapped inside his bag, staring at a shade. He thought this cat would make him seem like a weird person, but Felice thought he was one of those introverts. A female spotted this cat, and this startled the both of them. He was caught fast, and she was very into kitty cats, and he asked if she was returnee. She was Imari Kamari and had an invitation to enter the prestigious school. She searched every inch of her body to recover the invitation, eventually finding it and handing it over. His intuition was correct that they had the same invitation. She ran off to the building, and our boy told his cat that if her identity was revealed, they were done for. The principal was making a lengthy script, and I will skip most of it. A girl came on stage and asked the prime minister to skip his stupid speech because everyone wasn't listening. Her name is Minaho Kazuha, and she had a very calming appearance. She was an executive officer, and she assumed that everyone already had an idea what the school was about. A quarantine facility because everyone there was a ticking time bomb and their powers could destroy everything. They cannot let them run freely like a bunch of animals, but won't lock them up. The condition was, if they do leave, their powers will be sealed by the goddesses. She mocked kids about their nitty sayings and had a solution. She started to explain, but a crowd member was bored of her and wanted it brief. She reconciled with the crowd and started. Summoning circles allowing monsters to go through appeared. Felice thought it was interesting, but our boy was shocked like the rest. The ministers were fleeing for their lives, and our boy was going to run. But these other people weren't weaklings and pulled their swords from nowhere. A battle ensued between them all, and our boy had a view of the returners' power. Kazuha came down the stairs and was clapping. What she sent were toys and asked if they had fun fighting. She wanted them to fight with their skills to save the world once again. Their goal was to eliminate a tree that bore fruits, and demons would eat these fruits. In the past, a demon lord was so rampant they managed to destroy many worlds before the goddess realized. She was called the Demon Lord of the Lost World. She wanted them to prevent that from happening with their powers, and started the ability measurement test. She nearly forgot to do something and called 13 irrelevant names besides our boy. She wanted them to follow her, and he wondered what he had already done. She told them to go back to their dorms, and they did not have to take the test. Pulling up her sleeve, she showed a mark. Savior's crest, a mark given to people by the goddesses for saving the world. They were all sent here, but unfortunately, killed the demon lord in a different way that was unconventional. Dropout heroes were what they became, and if they worked hard, then they would soar through the ranks. An idiot wondered if she was underestimating him. She told him to use his brashness on the demon lord instead, but Imari told her no fighting. His ego was so huge that he started to flex his magic. She was not even surprised and wanted him to stop before anything happened. Rule violation, -1 point. Kazuha was lenient enough to not give him the point deduction. They were all failures who didn't accomplish their goals and would attend the same class. Rei was complimented for her nice timing, and Kazuha stirred him up on purpose. The magic circle was already hollowed, and she couldn't figure out who did that. Our boy was given a spacious room, not that luxurious, but it was home to him. The cat knew he was the one who neutralized the spell and probably got caught. He apologized for bringing his cat to this place. It was an enemy stronghold, and he believed life would be peaceful when he returned. Unfortunately, if she was caught, jail or death would occur right after. Felice transformed into a naked woman and leaned over to our boy. She asked what he was waiting for. After all, he had done some things to her before. He immediately got the blanket to cover her, and she wanted to teach him about that. She was grateful for him because she was supposed to be stuck in her world for all of eternity. She was feared as the lost demon lord who would have killed our boy if she didn't like him. In that world 3,000 years ago where he was summoned to fight her. The day he was summoned to another world, the demon lord invited him to kill her. She realized he was confused and she grabbed him up from the ground. She was Felice, and he caught on quickly that this was another world called the Lost World. It was a terrible name for a world only having endless wasteland remains. She was the one who destroyed everything and turned it into a wasteland. She wanted him to kill her, but she cannot harm herself because of her roots. Her soul's spiritual core was the root that defined their existence. Her soul was artificially made and had conditions of what she was not allowed to do. He couldn't fight, but she was going to spend many years teaching him. They were at the desired location, and it looked like a dead end. But no, she summoned a key and poked it through the door. Kyuya was welcomed into the treasure room filled with a plentiful sum of gold and weapons. All this treasure was found from the 3,000 worlds she has conquered before. Like a kid finding and exploring their options at a toy store, she scanned thoroughly through her treasures to find things to hasten his training. He was scouring the room and found an ordinary sword. He was going to pick it up, but Felice told him that the sword was a demonic sword. She only used it 3 times, and with his experience, he would instantly die. In 300,000 years, he would be able to pick it up, and time in her world was 1 in a 10,000th in his world. The first day would be a welcome party for him. He wondered what harsh training he would encounter and whether he could keep up. Fortunately, his first 3 tasks weren't that hard, but still trained his mind to focus. She wanted him to train so he can redirect 100% of his will towards his body. 50 years later, he was able to move his body the way he wanted it to be moved. 100 years later, he was starting to train with a sword, and his body started to be controlled. 1,000 years later, he was learning the foundation of magic, and it only took 10,000 years until he was able to use it properly. 20,000 years later, he was able to use a sword and magic enough to fight against demon creations from Felice. For him, it was another tiring day, but for her, she was more interested in the human manga stories he had read before. He was going to tell her about Beastars, and she was thrilled about the premise. She was enthusiastic to listen to these stories and his hometown. Even with boring stories, she liked it, especially one about a black cat, probably because she had nothing to do. Felice thought a cat was a bundle of miracles because of how they were always with him. He was staring at her and she asked if something was wrong. He thought of her as his cat. She was blushing, asking if they were family, and she misunderstood it for cute. But he just thought she was great, and this confused her. They couldn't face each other after he said that, and he spotted 2 skulls with a spear inside. He just saw her as an ordinary woman, and yet she destroyed the world. He asked why she destroyed the world. The answer wasn't anything too sophisticated, and she was just meant to. It was a glitch that she was speaking to him right now. Everything was destroyed before she was aware, and the blame didn't belong to her. In front of the buried waste, was she really innocent? She laughed it off, saying she was the demon lord and everything remains the same if she is conscious. The pain was irrelevant to her, as she said, but he didn't think so. She could no longer tell if she was lying to herself, but she knew she wanted to be free from this prison. She left the room exhausted, telling him to prepare for combat training. He didn't know what to say, and questions formed within his mind weighing his options. If only he could free her from her destiny and allow her to live like a normal human, little does he know he is the protagonist. During training, he would wonder if he could avoid killing her, if he can spend his time with her. Approximately 3,000 years later, it was about time for his task. He really didn't want to do this, but she wanted a conversation first. She has not broken free from her core, and her drive as the demon lord still binds her. Her temporary state wasn't infinite, and she will soon be turned into a demon of mass destruction and killing. He didn't mind her in that state, and she recognized what a kind person he was. Her greatest happiness was spending 30,000 years with him, and "Thank you, Kyuka. I'm glad it was you who killed me," she mentions. He started to enter flow state and withdrew his sword from his sheath. Felice was ready for him to kill her, and her aura spread throughout the wasteland. Her eyes were locked in and wanted him to end her misery. She immediately grasped onto his head with murderous intent, and he realized this wasn't the person he knew. He summoned a magic circle in an attempt to do something, but she slammed his hand into the ground. Felice had a warm demeanor with a smile, but this one didn't, and instead had a devilish appearance. He summoned magic circles to shoot beams at Felice, causing huge explosions. He was taught a variety of combat techniques in order to extinguish her for the sake of killing her. His desire was to let her live because of the time she gave in order to foster our boy. In 30,000 years, his one desire was for her to listen to him once. Amidst all the chaos, he was the one on top of her. When the demon lord will die, his contract that summoned him here will disappear. In her last breath, she wanted Kyuya to forgive her for dragging him in. He dropped his sword in anger, asking her why she apologized. If she truly was sorry, she should live even though she had caused anguish to many planets. His idea was to find a way to separate her, and she tried with the Lavanquin, and it didn't work. He summoned a magic circle, proudly announcing he shall be the one who frees her from the chains that bind her, wanting her to live as Felice, and not the demon lord. She was frightened that his body couldn't handle the pressure, and even her, the demon lord, couldn't accomplish the feat he would achieve. He grinned, saying he did win the fight after all. On his planet, half of the demon lord's world should go to anyone who cooperates with him. That is why he was ready to take half of her sins. He summoned Lavaquin, and the sword reacted to his call through her hideout. An aura of blackness consumed them, and he was faced with his own reality, which was he was not strong enough to wield the weapon. The sword started to mock our boy nonstop about giving up because that was what he always did. This time he couldn't give up anything and managed to step forward and take the sword from his inner ego. He saw Felice's other self, and he was going to free her from the chains that bound her. He laid on the ground, exhausted after his accomplishment, and Felice was a cat on top of him. She thought she was cute being in that form, and he didn't know why she looked like that. It was because Lavaquin did that to her, and her powers were shredded. She lost so much, resulting in her being weak and light. He believed he succeeded, but if Felice didn't help halfway through, they would have disappeared together in the world. She thanked Kyuya for freeing her from her restrictions. Unfortunately, she didn't plan what to do next, and an invitation from our boy to her to join him in his world was given. He wants to show her what a normal life would be, corporate slave, and she was more than happy to come with him. He was finally back to Japan, and 3 masked men came from black portals and asked if he was returnee. He didn't deny it and was given an invitation from the transferred management committee. It was a summon from an academy far away from Japan, and if he were to decline this invitation, then something unpleasant will occur. It seems like his normal life would have to be paused for whatever may occur later on. That is how one letter forced them to enter this academy together. It wasn't their plan, and he was sorry for not showing her a normal life, but this thrill was something she wanted. Felice wanted to know his desires because he surpassed her, and he would be able to take over the school within a flash. He wasn't interested in doing that because he had the opportunity to see what that led to. Like the protagonist he was, he didn't want to stand out from the rest and just wanted to live. Felice made mistakes in her life, and he should be more confident in himself. On top of the building, a goddess was commenting about the entrance exam she witnessed and was excited. She was Lala and couldn't wait to see who she would be supervising.